PGA Nation, we are back with another week, a fun week that will be. We're heading to Georgia. So we got Georgia on her mind on the RSM Classic. This is going to be a cut event, so kind of back to the norm a bit. Somewhere in between, we have not the full field of all the big names, but not quite a full JV tournament either. So we got some of the guys that we're used to in this tournament, and it should be a fun one to break down. Let's get started. Sia, how you doing tonight?
So speaking of a cut event, name drop, spoiler, I was on the first cut yesterday. It's the show I do on Monday for DFS purposes. And we were having a conversation, me and Rick and Greg Ducharme, about grocery store shopping and whether one enjoys grocery store shopping or not. And I said that I thought grocery store shopping was like a top 5, like low-key top 5 activity. Like, I love it. I think it's super fun and like liberating, especially when the grocery store is like kind of nice and the aisles are wide and you can just kind of cruise through them and whatnot. So before we even get started, Joel and Spencer, I need your opinions. Are you pro grocery shopping? Are you con grocery shopping? Joel, let's start with you.
You're going to laugh. I haven't gone grocery shopping in literally years. There used to be a grocery store in like underneath my building. When that got shut down, I have not gone grocery shopping since. So con for sure.
Wow. Spencer, go.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to give the same answer as him for pretty much the same exact reasoning.
Do you guys get your groceries delivered? Yeah, so bougie. So bougie. I kind of love it, but I think you're missing out. I genuinely think you're missing out. It's a whole like mentally, it's a great experience. Go back. Even you don't have to do a full grocery shop. Like do get a basket and get like 3 or 4 things and just cruise the aisles. It's fun. I'm telling you.
I can't be trusted in the grocery store. Once I'm in there, one basket's not even enough. I need to start buying everything.
That's the whole beauty of it, though. See, you're actually like kind of making my point. It's an adventure. You go in there and it's like, oh, look at all these things I can get. It's just a beautiful thing. Sorry, we're going to do a slightly quicker show, and I'm already off the rails with you guys. The short answer to your question, Joel, your original question is, I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
Good. Spence, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well also. I'm excited to have a full field 156 player tournament. I usually like these a little bit more than, these 132 players or less with it. So I think it's going to be a good week. Excited to do it. And it's an interesting DraftKings week for sure.
For sure. And you know what? I think this week, even more so than normal, I am super excited to hear your course breakdown. Right? I had a hard time. Like, there's the obvious, we always look for approach. I think this one that obviously you're going to want some accurate drivers, which is for sure something I'm looking at. After that, I was kind of like, I don't really know what else I'm looking for here. That's kind of the gist of what I got. So I'm like, all right, well, I got Spence tonight. So Spence is going to break it down for me. So without further ado, Spence, why don't you go ahead and hit it with us?
Well, I'll warn everyone right now, and maybe that's a good intro into it. It's going to be an extensive breakdown, even by my standards. So you might want to get your popcorn ready for it. But
yes,
the biggest thing worth mentioning is that we have a rotational setup this week. Players will be forced to play either their Thursday or Friday rounds over on the Plantation course. With that being said, I don't love getting overly concerned in trying to mimic a model to fit both venues. To me, this is similar to tracking weather splits for tee times. It sounds good on the surface, but there are so many variables that come into play that can quickly change things. It's not to say that there isn't an importance when 25% of your holes for the week come at a secondary layout, but the fact that we will still get the most important weekend rounds over at Sea Island means that the brunt of our research should remain in one location. Rotational events are always challenging for this reason. If you wanted to add a slight emphasis on par 5 scoring because golfers do get 4 during their one round, be my guest. But having similar green complexes throughout and it being Bermuda at both stops tells me that this isn't one of those venues where the rounds are night and day from each other. I expect similarities across the board. Wind typically plays a factor with such narrow landing areas off the tee. And it does play as a benefit if you can find the short grass. On average, the field connects on 80% of their greens in regulation when hitting their approach shots from the fairway. That's about as high as you will see on tour. We have a jarring 10 par 4s that measure between 400 to 450 yards when I rounded one of them down. The only 2 outliers were the 368-yard 8th hole and the 470-yard 18th. I don't typically like measuring outlier categories like that, but when 55% of the scoring can be condensed into one zone, I do think you need to take it as being a credible source. And then the last 2 things that stuck out to me that I think we need to talk about. The first would be 8.5% more approach shots come from 125 to 175 yards than tour average. You would think proximity ranges would be better since players will have a ton of short irons while approaching the green. But like all Fazio designs, undulation does play a factor. And with those second shots typically producing a higher proximity rate, we see 8.7% more putts made from 10 feet and beyond than an average stop. I think that's one of the reasons good putters have found success here. Some of your stellar proximity players like Keegan Bradley can compete because they're hitting a ton of greens and regulations per round. But we too tend to get wildly bad putting performances from anyone that sees a downgrade in my weighted putting that I ran. There is some rollover predictability when it comes to course history, but I didn't go more than 10%. But from a course perspective for a model, I started with 30% on a weighted strokes gain category that featured courses under 7,200 yards, easy scoring, and Bermuda greens. It was a relatively even split between the three, but to me, those three stats encompass what I wanted to find at a venue that isn't perfect from a quantifiable sense. I did another 30% on a recalculated metric that took that proximity from 125 to 175 yards and putting from 5 feet and beyond on Bermuda greens and combined them together with a 65-35 split of putting over proximity to form a unique category there. For the record, that's the opposite of conventional wisdom when you typically do something like that. Proximity tends to be more important than a random putting total, but I didn't see a great deal of predictability from that range in past leaderboards. Yes, the plurality of shots come there, but the easy answer remains that more putts are being made from 10 feet and beyond, which naturally means irons aren't being hit as close. 10% on moderate to severe wind. I don't think that really needs much of a description there. Greens in regulation gain for 15%. To be honest, I was tempted to avoid all accuracy and GIR stats because I know those are going to be the two most weighted categories. But I decided GIRs gained was the top corollary stat I could find. And then I wrapped it up with par 4 scoring from 400 to 450 yards for 15%. As I mentioned, I usually don't like specific categories like this because we far too often don't have enough data to make it worthwhile. Plus, I don't believe players notice small differences here and there. I doubt someone like Adam Scott, who ranks second in the field over his past 50 rounds between 400 to 450 yards, thinks to himself he's drawing dead when he gets to a 350, 400 range that he ranks 124th best in this field. But in the same breath, I don't know how you can avoid it completely when over 55% of the scoring chances become in this zone.
Well, I love it. I love it. That is super insightful. I am now definitely more prepared for this tournament.
Spencer, can I ask you something real quick? So just about the putting part of that. Are you, I hate to give you a blanket statement. You don't have to say yes or no to this, but are you kind of avoiding the bad putters here? Is that sort of a precondition to making your roster of DFS players?
I wouldn't say yes necessarily on the surface. I'm avoiding bad putters that are also showing as negative trajectory when I ran my weighted putting into the mix. So a really good example of that, and I do think he'll be fine this week, and we can talk about him in a little bit, but a guy like Keegan Bradley, 128th in this field in strokes gained putting. When we look at this weighted putting for a venue like this, he drops all the way to 144th. That's technically what I'm trying to avoid. Like a guy like Corey Connors, surprisingly, Emiliano Grillo, Charles Howell. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Russell Henley. These guys, even though they're not the greatest putters, they do see an improvement in my model when I ran it a certain way. So I'm willing to consider those guys. But if anybody's going to be a negative putter with these being longer putts needing to be made, like they kind of are off my radar for that reason.
With that said, as we kind of carry through the next, 40, 45 minutes or so, can you maybe give us an idea of like if we bring up a guy and he's not fitting in that weighted putting category and he's in that Keegan Bradley type category? I think the listeners and myself, it would be nice to know because I wasn't really on Keegan Bradley, but I was on Corey Connors, which is good. It sounds like that's good, right? Yeah. So I to distinguish those two, because they're both bad putters, obviously, if we're just talking generically, if you can maybe distinguish, if you can think of, just pointing that out when the time is right, that might be helpful.
For sure.
Cool.
I love it. Well, as we, I think that time is right now. So I think we can dive right into this top tier. See if you want to kick us off at the top, and who are you looking at here in this upper tier?
I'm looking at Isaiah because he agrees with me, and people who agree with me get priority over guys like Scotty Scheffler and Webb Simpson. So I'm with you on grocery stores. And then boom, Charlie chimes in, only solitude from the family. See, now we're thinking, right? Now, this isn't just surface level stuff. We're getting to the meat and potatoes of why people may subconsciously like going to the grocery store. We got a yippee from Charlie as soon as Spencer started. Here we go from Jesse, very loyal fans in here. And then Charlie, I'm out of breath. Because it really is breathtaking every time you do your model. It's super helpful. I encourage everybody to go back and listen to Spencer, because sometimes, your eyes can just kind of like glaze over and you're like, all right, what did he just say? Like, go back and listen, because this stuff actually really helps. Spencer writes an article for us at windailysports.com. And that article, Spencer, have you already published it or no?
I'm going to publish it tonight.
Awesome. And I know you're doing a show with Brian Kirshner after this, so I encourage everybody to watch that, but definitely read Spencer's article. Okay. Joel, I'm never answering your question. So here we go. In this top range, I'm going to keep this range relatively short. You guys can go on if you want, but there's two guys I really like, and they're guys I tend to like. It's Louis and Cameron Smith, but I like Louis a lot more. So those are going to be the two guys I'm going to play. I think roster construction is interesting here, because I think you can grab two guys at the top if you want to, or like, let's say a Corey Connors and a Louis, or if you want to place Scheffler or Webb Simpson or whatever, and go down to the 6K range if you have to with a guy. Cause there's like 4 or 5 guys in the 6K range I genuinely think are going to make the cut. Stay tuned for that. But I can tell you the few lineups I've already made have two kind of high end guys. And then I go down to the 8K, 7K, and then cap it with the 6K range guys. So give me Louis, give me Cam Smith. We're looking for ball strikers. Louis certainly fits into that category. Of course, so does Webb. So does Harris English. I think Webb's going to be really chalky. I'm not so sure he's at peak Webb right now. And I think Louis is, in spite of having a bad putter over his last 4 tournaments. You take that out, and we know he can spike with the putter. So I'm not really worried about that. The ball striking is there. This is a perfect course for him, in my opinion. You don't have to be long. He's just going to lazily just swing the club, beautiful stroke, and it's just going to find the fairway. It's going to find itself 8 feet from the hole, and he's going to make half of those, and he's going to win the tournament. So those are the two guys I like the best.
I like it. And Sia, do you got some action tonight?
Oh, you can tell. You can tell in the reflection, right? You know what's funny? So the answer is no, but yes, because I'm going to put a live bet in, likely on Eastern Michigan at home against Western Michigan. If you're not on the Sharp app already, the Sharp app guys you get free bets if you just download the app. But more importantly, if you subscribe, there's all kinds of bets in there. Anthony, I think, has a bet on Eastern Michigan. I think can't remember what the spread was. But the point is, I'm actually waiting for Western Michigan to maybe score so I can get a really beneficial number, and then I'm going to hit it. So I'm distracted, but I'm not distracted. Carry on.
Not that it matters. I did that last night in the Rams game, and so it didn't work out for me.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing. I was on the early edge, and I specifically said, wait for the Niners to score early and then bang the number when it's really beneficial, which is exactly what I did. I had the Rams plus 3.5, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I get the hook too. They were only down 7-0, and oh my, that was a disaster. Holy cow, that was bad. Anyway.
Oh, fun times. All right, Spence, who are you looking at up here in the top range?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with Sia with what he just said. I don't want to spend too much time reiterating the same thoughts with it, but I think Cameron Smith plays well in all game types. He's number 1 ranked player in my model when looking at that recipe of irons plus putting, and is also 5th when it comes to scoring on easy courses. But my favorite play is Louis this week. He's surprisingly gotten cold with his putter, losing in 4 straight events and averaging -2 strokes per. But he's leading this field in strokes gained tee to green over his past 24 rounds. So if he's able to flip the script with what should be the best part of his game, the stats are trending towards a big result. I have some concerns with him for cash game type contests. I think it's always scary when what you do best isn't working, but that can easily be flipped elsewhere if just focusing in on his upside. I like the fact that he's just over 10% right now. And I think his win equity is about as good as anyone in this field. So if you made me power rank these guys, and I just want to note the one guy that I have absolutely no interest in would be Harris English. I think the other 4 make some sense with it. But if you made me power rank them, I like Louis, Cam, Scheffler, and Webb. And then, as I said, 0 exposure to English. For cash, I would probably go Webb, Scheffler, and Cam Smith as the only 3 I would be looking at there.
I like it. So I can I ask, why do you hate Harris English?
I don't like Harris English for a couple reasons. I mean, if one of the things we look at, he has the negative weighted putting that I was talking about, but more so than anything, if I'm going to try to create leverage in other spots, I think there's better ways to do it than a golfer that just pulled out of a tournament at the CJ Cup. That worries me a little bit. His back flared up there. I don't really know where his game's at. I mean, I think I don't want to start jumping down into ranges, but I think a guy like Joaquin Niemann at 9,700 adds about as much of a leverage opportunity as Harris English. And I think there's just other ways to get different with the build. I'm assuming you like Harris English based off of that question, but that's just my thought with it.
For me, I do like Harris English. My thought around him is you're right. It is a leverage play. I think he's looking at one of the lower owned players. I do think he has the upside. So I like him more from a leverage standpoint than anything, because I do think he can, get a top 5 or win this tournament here. My favorite play up here, though, is Webb. I know I am concerned, like you guys are, on his ownership. Right now, what I'm seeing isn't too bad. So if he stays in the teens, I'm happy to play him there. If he does creep up into the 20s, even mid-20s, then I'll probably look to pivot. So let's keep an eye on Steven's report, which comes out on Wednesday, which is definitely the most accurate ownership report I've seen by a long shot. So when we get that Wednesday night, I'll take a look and see where his ownership is. If it stays in the teens, I will for sure be all over Webb this week. And again, for similar reasons, I think Scotty Scheffler is going to be pretty low owned, and if he stays that way, I also will play him for leverage. I think he's similar to Harris English in that, I think he is the upside to win the tournament. At looking like someone that might not be highly owned, but that's strictly a leverage play for me, and someone that I would like to see ownership on before I commit to.
I think that makes sense, by the way. I mean, Webb carries his course history over better than any player on tour, probably. We have 2 top 3s here in his last 3 attempts. And I really like Scheffler. If you could promise me that Scheffler was going to be like 10 to 12% owned, I'm in on it at that. If he's over 15%, I'll probably look elsewhere.
I think I'm on the same page as you with that one for sure. All right, good stuff. Let's look at this 9K range. Spence, you want to kick us off in the 9K range?
Yeah, so my favorite play is Corey Connors. I know he looks like he's going to be the most popular selection, so that's unfortunate. But I just think it's one of those spots where I'm going to trust my math and go entirely overweight to get around the popularity. I think you can make a strong argument that he might be the 3rd best play on this entire board. My initial model thought he was the best before I altered a few things. But it's literally across the board with him grading in the top 10 of not only stats, but also some of the deeper dives I looked with him that I didn't even weigh into my metrics. So I have him top 10 in strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained total, strokes gained at easy courses, venues under 7,200 yards, wind play, Bermuda grass, par 4 scoring from 400 to 450 yards. I'm going to keep reading these off because I think it's important. Accuracy, GIRs gained, and his combination of putting plus iron play, which is the notable one that I talked about a little bit. We know Connors can't putt, but he was one of the 5 biggest climbers in my model when I compared Bermuda putting from outside of 10 feet to my 2-year total of all putting stats. I will give you the top 5 just to kind of throw that out there. So number 1 was Brandon Grace. Number 2 was Russell Henley, who does unfortunately need to be discussed here. Corey Connors was 3rd. Matt Wallace was 4th. And then Charles Howell was 5th. We saw Howell win the event in 2018. So I believe that metric means a lot. As far as Henley is concerned, he enters the week dialed in with his irons, having averaged 5.2 shots over his last 3 starts. He has a lot of similarities when it comes to where Webb Simpson plays well. But I've kind of found myself boxing him out of some lineups because of the overexposure I want to create with Connors. I don't have a problem with Henley on the surface, but I almost prefer him as an outright ticket if I'm going to play him. And then the 2 that I want to mention that I like as potential pivots or values would be Adam Scott at 9,000. And I mentioned Joaquin Niemann at 9,700 earlier. I think Scott makes a ton of sense if you want to get off of Kevin Kisner. I understand the thought process for people betting Kisner in the outright market, but 10% or higher is too high for a golfer averaging negative 7.98 strokes total over his last 6 starts. And that's including his victory at the Wyndham. Instead, Scott has quietly been trending in the right direction. As many of you will remember, Kisner's win at the Wyndham should have been Scott's if he could have just drained his 3-foot putt in the playoff. And despite a negative showing with his irons last week, he's gained 3.28 strokes with them over his previous 6. And then I know it doesn't surprise anyone because I mention Joaquin Niemann every week, but the Houston Open was the first time Niemann has lost off the tee plus approach in the same start since the Open in 2019. In fact, I only had 3 occurrences to date where he has done that, and he followed up every outing with a top 38 finish in his next start. The putter continues to look bad, but I'm going to trust my math here when the whole industry looks to be deserting ship. He's likely going to be the the lowest owned player, $9,000 or above. And I continue to like the leverage he creates. I view this very closely to Sungjae at the Shriners or Hovland at Mayakoba. I know everyone got a little bit fed up with me naming those three golfers every show also, but my model saw something that wasn't showing in many spots. There is another player in the $8,000 section when we get there. That's also ringing true, but those are the four that I like the best this week.
I love it. I love it. See it. How about you? Who are you looking at here?
I'm looking at Jeep Devil because Jeep Devil also likes grocery stores. And he's quoting me. He doesn't realize it from yesterday. Put in your headphones and listen to a podcast. Can Louis perform in a birdie fest? My answer to that is yes. Do you guys have any concern there, Joel?
I don't love Louis as much in a birdie fest, but yes, I do believe he can get performing.
One of the things I noted on, I believe on the Better Golf Pod and on Be the Number, it's not like we're talking about a contest where 25 under is going to be the winning score. It's been 17 under to 21 under, I believe, in each of the last 5 years. I think we'd be naive to say that Louis can't get himself to 20 under par and win this tournament. Sure, I like him better when it's not a birdie fest, but 20 under par seems perfectly reasonable for him to be able to get to.
Totally. Any guy who can really spike with the putter, which he hasn't done lately, but certainly historically, at least in last year, he was just incredible. So I think he's fine in a birdie fest. So the 9K range, listen, I don't like a lot of guys. I think the Neiman pivot is really interesting. I think Alex Noren is interesting. He's got an 18th and a 10th here. He is one of those guys that just simply doesn't rate out well in models, including mine. I think it's interesting that his approach game has been kind of way off, but yet he has a pretty good track record here, and his price almost seems funny, right? Like, who would want to play? I know this isn't like the best field, but who would want to play Alex Noren at 9,500? It doesn't make a lot of sense, which is why from a game theory standpoint, it kind of makes some sense. So I think I might splash the pot a little bit with Alex Noren. It's certainly not a play I'm recommending. For me, it's Corey Connors in the 9K range or nothing. I think Neiman is definitely interesting. I don't think I'm going to be on Henley. I was on Adam Scott last week. He made the cut, didn't do very well. I think Adam Scott is fine. I think that would be also a pretty good pivot off Corey Connors' chalk. But for me, I'm grabbing a guy in the 10K range. I'm grabbing Corey Connors, and then I'm working my way down for the most part.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with you. For me, it's Corey Connors here or nothing. I do like some of these guys in the 10K range better. So I'll have definitely playing Corey Connors. And I'll be overweight. I do like Corey Connors a lot outside of Connors. I want to sprinkle in some of the 10K range and then be pretty balanced outside of that. So I'm really not too interested outside of him there.
So I haven't verified this yet, Charlie. We talked about it again on the first cut yesterday a little bit. We believe that, Corey Connors was an expecting dad in the fall. So, he's back playing, which probably means, put 2 and 2 together. He probably had his baby. So if we want to ride the narrative of the baby narrative and the new proud dad, that's yet another reason. Imagine, I actually picked Corey Connors for one and done, and now I'm kind of picturing the scenario where he takes down the tournament and pays all his gratitude to the mom of his new child and all this stuff. So if we're narrative building, that's even more reason to play Corey Connors. But honestly, look at the metrics, look at his history here. It's pretty awesome. Dylan, whatever, dude. You're wrong. I don't know what to tell you.
Do you think Corey Connors goes to the grocery store for his new baby, or do you think he has his groceries delivered?
Well, he's busy, so there's an excuse there. Anyway, okay, so Chris Cox says, what up? I don't know if he's joined us on the show before, so if not, Chris, thanks for hanging out. Please hang out the rest of the show and in the future. And sorry, I'm just ranting on the comments. We got a lot of interaction.
I love it. All right, enough of you, Sia. We're moving on to the 8K to the 8K range. We go. Spencer, kick us off. Who are you looking at down here?
Yeah, I don't love the 8,000s as a whole. In most of these spots, I would rather dip down into the 7,000s or get up to Scott, but there are a few worth mentioning before I do that. I do want to note that we have a ton of bad course history for whatever that is worth hanging out in this zone. Even if we take a guy like Mackenzie Hughes, who won it in 2016, he hasn't been better than a 65th in 4 appearances since. Homa hasn't made a cut in 3 showings. Vegas has missed 2 of 3. Rose is 0 for 1. Seamus has been disastrous with 3 missed cuts in a 74th, although I will get more into him in a second. But I guess let me provide a few positives for some of these guys. I do like Justin Rose a little bit at 8,800. I think the price is too high. But it's a very similar spot that we got with him at the Wyndham Championship. He had a chance to win that event late before faltering down the stretch, and he provides more of that out of left field upside over many of these players. He's a nice value in my model when comparing him to ownership, and he does crack the top 25 in general. That can be a fun combination for a golfer under 5%. I like Joel Dahman at 8,500. I still think he's a fine play, but I'm starting to move him more into cash territory if he's going to be 15% owned. I'd be curious to see where that ends up going, but at 15%, I'm kind of starting to get a little hesitant with it. I think Seamus is in a good bounce back spot after burning the industry at the Houston Open. I am a little surprised he's as popular as he is given his course history and last result, but I will blame myself for starting this movement on Seamus. And then my favorite play is Chris Kirk at 8,000. He is the one I was alluding to when I said I had someone in the 8,000 that keeps grading higher for me than consensus. Kirk is one of just 4 players that ranks inside the top 19 of all stats that I ran. The other 3 were Webb, Henley, and Connors.
Love it. I love it. I'm pretty aligned with you here in this range. I really prefer the bottom half of the range. I think one guy you didn't mention that I maybe you did mention. I'm sorry if you did. I really like Brendan Todd. I think Todd's interesting here. I think, for someone we're looking to find fairways on, I think that's something he's going to do really well. He does have a top 5 in the event. I like Todd even more for cash for sure, because I do think he's pretty safe. But I think you can also play him in tournaments as well. And the whole bottom half of this 8K range, I think, is what really interests me most. I think Mito is in play here as well. I know Mito has cooled off a bit recently, but we've seen the upside, and I think a Birdie Fest is going to do Mito really well, competing here in this type of event. So, and I also look, the early ownership on Mito looks very, very reasonable. So if it's going to stay in single digits, that's even better. And then lastly, I'm totally aligned with you on Chris Kirk. His course history, I think course fit, it all aligns at a really reasonable price and ownership. So I think those are the guys I'll be looking at to round out my 8K range. See, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short. You guys mentioned the 3 guys I like the most. It's Joel Dahman, which, again, I'm a little surprised at the ownership. Again, we'll have to wait for Steven's article tomorrow around 5, 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That usually really kind of pinpoints the exact projected ownership. So I'll wait and see on that. I do like Joel Dahman. He strokes gained total last week, 10. I mean, he's been in really good form, not just last week, but a 45th before that, a 24th before that. Made the cut before that. In this field, I mean, his course history isn't outstanding, but it's the type of guy that's volatile but can get hot. So I like him. I like Brendan Todd. I definitely agree with the course fit. And I'll tell you, as far as Chris Kirk, I put in 3 outrights when the numbers came out Monday morning, and Chris Kirk was one of the 3 at 70-1. Well, I just looked on DraftKings and it's 45-1. I don't know the site I bet it on. I'm not sure if it's been bet down at all, but I thought 70-1 was like a pretty egregious error. I think he should have been 50-1, maybe 55-1, and take that, PGA tout, because apparently he doesn't like Chris Kirk this week. So I'm a fan. I think 8,000 is a very reasonable number, especially when you look at the other guys that are in that 8K range. Like if you swapped Kirk and Joel Dahman, for example, I like them both, but if you swap them, I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure, makes sense. So I think 8K is fine.
I love it. And let's not forget that Joel Dahman also has the highest first name gained as well. So
that's true.
That is true.
Very true.
If I could add one thing to what was just said with it, I think Kirk has moved almost across the board. I've seen him at 40 or 50-1 almost at all books that I'm looking at. He was one of the first bets that I placed also at 70-1. And I just want to co-sign on the Brendan Todd thing. I skipped him originally when I was giving this breakdown, but I kind of think he's a potentially good pivot away from Dahman if the ownership goes crazy with it in GPPs. I agree with you, Joel. I think he's better for cash, but if he's going to be 7% owned, like I'll take my leverage and have a few shots with him. For sure.
And he does pop here and there. He does have those tournaments where he puts it all together. He sinks a few putts and then boom, he's in the top 10. So in this field too, it's not all that strong of a field. He can definitely compete here. Let's take a dive down into the 7K range. I think this is a pretty interesting 7K range. So, Sia, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, it's finally we sort of get into a big range here, and it's much like the 8K range. I don't really start to like much until we get to like 7,500 and below. One of the guys I really like, speaking of guys who did really well last week, Luke List gained over 13 strokes tee to green at the Houston Open. Now, he lost 6 with the putter, which is like kind of standard. I mean, it's a little worse than his normal, but gaining 13 strokes tee to green, if he loses 3 strokes putting, which is still a pretty bad week, that's the type of thing where, he could end up in the top 5 here. So I like Luke List quite a bit. Aaron Rai, I like quite a bit as well. He's been in really good form. He gained over 7 strokes tee to green last week. He's made 3 cuts in a row. I like him. I feel like he's still a little under the radar. Maybe shouldn't be. Of course, I'm going to go back to Henrik Norlander. I like him quite a bit. Let's see. As we go down to the kind of 7,100 range, Alex Smalley, who I know is kind of a Win Daily favorite among some of us, like Isaiah, for example. Coach has been on Alex Smalley for quite some time. I like him quite a bit. And then if we go to the 7K flat, Scott Piercy, I was kind of on him last week, and I think he's kind of sneaky this week as well. So those are the main guys I like in the 7K range.
I like it. Spence, how about you? Who are you looking at down here?
I kind of like a lot of people in this $7,000 range. Matt Kuchar at 7,900, 4 made cuts out of 5 tournaments. It does seem likely he's probably a better cash game play because his potential is capped a little bit. I'm starting to like Charles Howell at 7,800. The price might seem too high, but this is one of the few events a year that he possesses real win equity. We don't necessarily need that at 7,800, but I like how he sets up for Sea Island at around 5%. Brian Harman is GPP only at 7,800, but he's one of the better contrarian values I can find on the board. 3 top 32s in his last 4 at the track. The iron play is worrisome, having lost in 7 straight, but there is some of that Jason Kokrak type of appeal being exuded from Harman. He has top 20 win equity in my model for a guy that nobody seems to want to play. You're going to have to live with the erratic nature on him if you do, but it's not like he's been a complete disaster during most of these starts. I like Matt Wallace at 7,600. I don't know if he's ever graded out well for me, but I had him land 4th from an overall rank sense. The form in Europe has been questionable leading into the week, but I kind of think he has playability across the board. My model surprisingly likes him better for cash, and it's, take it for what it's worth. He probably makes more sense because he's sub 10% in a GPP, but I mean, for him to be top 10 in a cash ranking, I thought meant something. I'm glad that DraftKings listened to me and didn't price Jason Day at 7,400 again. Still a slap in the face with him at 7,600, but at least I don't have to sue them at this moment for price shaving. It seems to be a good sign that Day has decided to tee it back 2 weeks in a row. He had mentioned that we might only be seeing him 3 times in total over the next handful of months, so I assume the back feels healthy. He finished 12th here last year and is one of the top contrarian values I have in the 7,000s. The only 3 that are higher would be Harman when I attach no floor to his grade, Lanto, and Brandon Grace overall. I was ready to go all in on Brandon Grace at 7,400 until I saw his tweet that he is dealing with costochondritis, an inflammation of the cartilage that usually develops after straining a muscle. I am stubborn and sometimes, still want to play these people, and I probably still will here. If he's going to be 1 or 2% owned, I'll take my chances with it. I do like his upside and how he fits the course statistically. And then just to rapid fire off some people, I think Emiliano Grillo makes sense as a pivot away from Grace. As I mentioned, I like Lanto Griffin. He ranks between 16th and 60th in all categories I ran if I remove par 4 scoring from that specific range. And then the 3 golfers that showed us the biggest edge for me down at the bottom were Brian Stewart, Brendan Steele, and Alex Smalley. I made a minor change to my model to try and avoid the influx of Korn Ferry players infiltrating my top 50 every single week. The only 2 that were left were Smalley and Davis Thompson.
I like it. I think that makes sense. For me, I think that there's a lot going on in this range. I'm with you I tend to start toward the middle or bottom. I like Kevin Streelman. Kevin Streelman looking single % owned. I think he's going to be a good course fit. He tends to be like streaky, like hit or miss. Some weeks he had others, but I think he has upside, right? At this price point, I think if he has one of those good weeks, he can definitely be in a winning lineup. I really like an interesting one for me. I'm with on Adam Long. I think Adam Long is really interesting this week. I think he's a good course fit. His history is like good, not great, but good. He makes cuts here. He's got a 35th and a 30 his last 2 tries. And Adam Long's recent form has been, eye-popping, right? He's got, 4 top 30s in his last 5 outings. Tied for 11th last time at the Open. So at sub 10%, I think Adam Long at 7,500 is really interesting for me. Then I'm going to keep scrolling down. I'm with you on Emiliano Grillo. He's definitely someone worth taking a shot on this week. maybe if you want to look at one of the new up-and-comers in Hayden Buckley, I would be okay with that. He looks to be finding some pretty decent form as of recently. At the bottom of this range, I know Sia's, I'm sure, going to mention his boy, Henrik Norlander, who I think is going to be a good fit. He graded out really well for me this week. I think Adam Hadwin, this could be a week where he could pop. He doesn't have great history, which concerns me here, but this does feel like a course that would suit him well. Now that we're getting him at favorable ownership and price, this is the type of swings I like to take on Hadwin. And then kind of round out down here, I like Brian Stewart at 7,200. I think he's another course fit. I don't think you're going to get probably like a top 10, maybe at best 10th, but I do think at this price, that could still be someone in your lineup that could help you cash for sure.
So quick question for Spencer. When we get to the sort of the weighted putting portion of your model, because you like Griot, we know he's a pretty bad putter, and I'm being nice. Does he grade out okay in terms of like that sort of differentiation you had where Keegan Bradley's in one bucket, but then other guys like Connors are in another bucket? Which bucket does he land in?
Yeah, so Emiliano Griot, from a 2-year perspective, ranks 98th for me. His weighted putting was 68th, so there's a 30-spot increase. And we kind of see that with Emiliano Griot last year at this tournament. He gained strokes on these greens, and that's something he never does. And I don't think that that's a fluky performance from him. I think it's because these are just better surfaces for him. So if he can be neutral on the putting surface, I mean, he can give you a top 10 performance here.
So let's do this exercise one or two more times. Kyle Stanley, who probably has the worst short game in this entire field. I'm a big Kyle Stanley fan because he's such a good ball striker. Any chance his weighted putting performance improves upon what is probably close to last place in the regular putting?
He's 140th for me in regular putting. He is 150th in weighted putting, so he's just bad across the board.
Man, it's unbelievable. Okay, last one though. Doug Gim, who can really have struggles with the putter, but we know he's a good ball striker. Where does he land there?
So Doug Gim is 146th in weighted putting. He is 38 spots below his total of 108th.
Gotcha. So pretty bad there. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Awesome. See, anyone else for you down here in the 7K range?
No, I mean, I think I pretty much covered it. I did want to ask about Kyle Stanley and Doug Gim. I mean, other than that, Lucas Glover, he's interesting to me. Denny McCarthy has been playing some good golf. He's also interesting to me. And he does have an 8th place finish here 2 years ago. And he's coming in with 2 top 15s in a row. So I think, does Denny McCarthy show up for either of you two in any way?
Yeah, I bet Denny McCarthy as a top 40. I think he's a pretty decent play on a site like DraftKings. And then I'll let Joel answer the question, but I just want to throw one thing out there very quickly. Streelman, which Joel said, and Harmon were 2 of the biggest climbers I had in my model when it came to win equity. So it's kind of what Joel's talking about. You're going to have to deal with the volatility, but both of those guys have upside to compete.
Fair enough. And it looks like we have, pretty decent confirmation that Corey Connors is a dad at this point. Thank you, Isaiah, for promoting that narrative because it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I will add, I think I'm a little bit higher on Kyle Stanley than normal this week. For me, what's bringing me on to Stanley is his history, right? He's done it here enough times where I feel like maybe he's just seeing something on this, you know what I mean? Like he sees it a little differently. I think the consistency, right? A lot of made cuts, a lot of top 30s. I think I will find myself kind of spinning Stanley into a few lineups. And the one guy in this range I didn't mention that I do want to bring up that I like is Ches Reavie, who graded out really well for me, who's should be a really good course fit. Not a great history, but I think he's a guy that tends to pop here and there, and this could be a week where it might make sense for him. So let's wrap it up down in the 6K range. Sia, who are you looking at down on the bottom?
Yeah, I'll be super quick here. I'll give you 4 names that I like. Tom Hogue is one of them. I don't love him, but I like him enough to play him here and there. Last week he was pretty good. He gained 6 on approach. He lost 4 with the putter. He's made 5 cuts in a row, which I think is pretty telling for a 6K guy. The next guy I like, and I really like these next 2. John Huh, he's made 5 out of his last 6 cuts at the RSM. He had a top 15, or I should say a tied for 15th at the Mayakoba. I think the history here is pretty good. Michael Thompson, great course fit, excellent history here, coming off another tied for 15th at the Mayakoba. He tied with John Huh there. And then Jim Herman, who's super low. He's made 5 out of his last 6 cuts at the RSM, including 2 top 20s, and he's coming off a T54 at the Houston Open. So again, this guy, I think he's like 6,200, maybe 6,300. A guy that pops here and there, and he's coming in with decent form on a course he likes. So if you need to find the cash, I think Jim and Herman is your guy. But in terms of the 6K range guys that might be the secret weapon, which by the way is 46 and 13, John Huh and Michael Thompson are going to be candidates for that for sure.
I love it. Now, let me ask you, with the secret weapon, do you get a record reset on a new season, or does the record maintain lifetime?
I feel like it's just may as well be a lifetime record, only because it's, new seasons are arbitrary, as are calendar years. So running total 46 and 13, that's what we got.
I love it. Well, I'll tell you what, heck of a record.
Yeah, thank you.
It's pretty impressive. So let's find out who the secret weapon is and jam them into some of our lineups. Spence, who are you looking at down here in the 6K range?
Yeah, I'll make it quick myself. I'll give 5 names. I think Sia's boy, Harry Higgs at 6,900 makes some sense. Cam Davis at 6,800 because of his upside on short courses. We typically think bomb and gouge because of his length, but he does his best work while clubbing down. I like Davis Thompson. I like Andrew Putnam. And my favorite play in this range, which I am now hoping it's going to be the secret weapon, is Michael Thompson. I have a top 40 bet on him. And if it ends up being the secret weapon, I'll probably put a little bit more of a exposure on him on that wager.
Do you guys know what his current ownership projection is? I know it's early, but I'm curious what you guys are seeing.
I have 4%.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
That would qualify. Hopefully it stays around there because he definitely is a strong candidate. By the way, shout out to Sahith Thagala. Probably not watching, but he was watching our video because he liked it. He added me on Twitter, which was really cool. I think he is going to come onto the show. I'm trying to reach out to him privately and get him on, but obviously he's busy with, golf. But we got this break coming up the next 6 weeks or so. So we'll try to get him on with us 3. But anyway, that's it.
I love it. For me, down the 6K range, I'm pretty low. I don't love this range. I don't want to be too heavily exposed to it. The few guys that I'm considering are Andrew Landry at 6,800, Camilo Villegas at 6,800. Against what I normally am very against Matthew Naismith, but I can see him competing here. Michael Thompson, will be someone who's on my radar. Hank Lebioda graded out well. I probably won't be playing to play too much of him. John Huh also graded out well, so I'm aligned with you on him. There was one other play that I had highlighted. Oh, Vaughn Taylor. Vaughn Taylor, I think, is pretty interesting here at 6,500. I think he grades out well for this course, and he has a pretty good course history as well.
My model loved Camilo Villegas this week.
He's another one of those guys that he goes on those streaks where he'll have 2 or 3 months where he puts it together and he's really competing, and then he kind of falls off. But yeah, I think if he hits a lot of fairways this week, I think he can definitely compete.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, that's a wrap from the DFS side. So something going on in the betting market. We're going to go to some outrights. Unfortunately, and I know it's what are we going to do with our money if we don't have first-round leaders? We'll give them to you, right? Just not tonight, because this course is being played the first day on 2 different courses. So it's a little tricky in that one course is a par 72 and one's a par 70. So how this books are going to do first round leader is probably going to be a little different than normal as opposed to just the top overall play, and the lines haven't been put up yet. So unfortunately, we can't give you the hammer lock first round leader plays that we normally would give you, but check back. We'll be on Twitter. We'll be in Discord. We're going to plan those plays when those lines come out. But for tonight, we are going to get into the outright market, and we're going to give you those outright plays. So Spence, you want to kick us off in the outright market?
We can say it's because of 2 courses, but I saw what happened last week. I mean, they muted both of your mics as we were trying to have this discussion. I had a Luke List first round leader that ended up chopping 5 ways with that. So anybody who bet that would have been profitable. Sportsbooks are trying to shut us down. They're not even releasing the odds. They want to hear this show and see what we're going to say before they release it. So I think it's more of that than the course split thing here. But I have a big outright card. It's probably one of the biggest I've had when it comes to exposure. And part of the reason is because I kind of got a happy trigger finger at the beginning here to where I grabbed Russell Henley at 31-1 when that number first came out. He's now in the low 20s. As I said, I think he makes better sense as an outright ticket. If I could redo things, I think Joaquin Niemann might have been the play I would have gone with. I have Corey Connors at 27-1. I have Louis Oosthuizen at 25-1. I never have three guys that are sub 40-1 on a card. And then I also built it out a little bit further than that. I have Chris Kirk at 70-1, Brian Harman at 80-1. And the first bet that I made was Brandon Grace at 100-1 before I found out about what's going on with him. I'm going to keep it, hope for the best on it. But those are my 6 this week.
I love it. I think that's a great looking card. For me, I have a bit of a smaller card. Maybe a long shot swing that I'm going to take. I think Aaron Rye at 90-1 is an interesting one. Henrik Norlander at 100-1. Emiliano Grillo at 100-1. But my favorite, I think my more realistic bet that I think actually might be able to come through and win the tournament is Mito at 60-1. Sia, how about you? Who are you looking at here in the outright market?
So in the outright market, I've got 3 guys. 3 guys I've got 5 actually. I'm going to give 5 out, but I've bet 3 already. I got Louis Oosthuizen and Connors both at 25-1 when prices came out on Monday morning, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me that either of them were there, but that's what I got. Louis is now, I think, 16-1 on DraftKings and Connors is 25-1. That's not where I bet it, but that's where it is on that site. Chris Kirk, I got at 70-1 on DraftKings. It's 45-1. So I guess I did a good job there. The only other 2 I'm going to give out, they're both 90-1. I thought Aaron Rye was pretty solid at 90-1, by the way, Joel, and Grillo at 100-1, but I'm going to go with Adam Long at 90-1 just because he's been so hot. And this other guy, I think I'm definitely betting as a first-round leader when those odds come out. Maybe they're out now, but they certainly weren't out before our show started. But Luke List at 90-1 is another outright for me. I think those 2 guys could get into the mix. They've shown how good they've been striking the ball the last few tournaments. So I think 90-1 is a good number there.
I love it. This is a great ticket. I think we have an exciting week. For me, I'm excited because I feel like there's a lot of, for me, easy fades this week. So it helps me narrow my player pool on who I really want to focus on. What else? Do we leave anything out for this week?
Let me ask you, I don't think so, other than there is one thing I wanted to get to. But before we bounce out of here, do you guys have a preference? Assume the wind is just normal. Plantation is the easier of the 2, right? And then Seaside, where we're going to play 3 days, is slightly harder just from a to par perspective. Would you guys prefer, or does it not matter? Would you guys prefer starting with a guy on an easier course? Just, is there a psychological component there, or starting with a guy on the harder course?
For me, I don't want to overweight that for this reason. I and it's my own personal, I tend to just overthinking those things, put too much weight into it, right? And it's just kind of more of like, who do you like for the week, right? It's still 4 days, 3 days are on one course. Take the guys you like and don't put too much onto one thing. And you don't want to remove someone from your player pool that you otherwise would have liked for that reason. So I'm going to try and not make that a factor.
Yeah, I think that has more relevance when you look at a situation like Torrey Pines North and South course with it. I know there's a thing that North course is one of the most difficult courses on tour, and guys that have to play it Friday, or I don't quote me on that. I don't know which order it is, but there's a certain order that makes it worse. I don't think that's what comes into play here. I think both of these courses are easy. I mean, if you made me handpick how I would want it, I guess I'd rather have the par 72 second and let these guys be a little bit more in rhythm, but that is like the ultimate tiebreaker if I can't make a decision between 2 players. Like, that's not going to be the substance of why I'm making a decision.
Right. And Charlie has a question to close the show here. Does it typically come for the Plantation course? I think the way they do it is they have a first round leader for the Plantation course and they have a first round leader for the Seaside course. So obviously those odds are going to be trimmed because half the field is in one and half the field is in the other. But I think that's how they're going to do it. Spencer and I were talking about that before the show, and I think he thinks that as well. So Charlie, everybody, Isaiah, we had some new people chime in, Dylan, Chris Cox, Jeep Devil. That's an interesting name. Charlie, I might have already said your name, but everybody, thank you for joining the show. There's some guys in our Discord that for whatever reason weren't able to comment that they were super complimentary of our show. Get in our Discord, get to windailysports.com because we'll have that article with ownership, but we'll also have the secret weapon in there tomorrow night. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And Joel, you're the host, but I feel like I did need to say one more thing. And it's just one of those things that's important to me, kind of like the grocery store thing. Sports.